Good day everybody, my name is Awesomecrunch and welcome to a video on the real life counterparts of creatures from Subnautica Below Zero. Now if you've already watched the first video like this just on the original Subnautica creatures, you'll know what this video is about to be, but just in case you haven't, basically in this video I'll be running through a list of some of Below Zero's creatures with each of their counterparts or inspirations you might find here on planet Earth. This won't be all of Below Zero's creatures because some of them, like the Arctic Peeper, are basically just fish and not really worth talking about. Just before the video starts, I'm going to plug my Discord server, link in the description, where I do weekly Steam game giveaways, and it's a pretty nice place, so definitely check it out if that tickles your fancy. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like if you do go on to enjoy the video, and maybe even consider subscribing if you want to stick around for more videos in the future, and click that bell to be notified as soon as I upload. So, let's get on with the list. First up, we have the Brinewing. These aggressive, long-snouted creatures actually share features with quite a few species here on Earth. Its transparent fins look very similar to those of the flying gurnard, a bottom-dwelling fish which can be found in the warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Its long snout and head shape shares many similarities with those of a family of sygnathiform fish, which include seahorses and pygmy pipe horses. Surprisingly, the Brinewing's unique attack method of shooting ice at its prey isn't so alien either, possibly inspired by real-life archerfish which can fire jets of water from their mouth to knock prey off branches which are hanging over the water's surface. Next up is the newtfish, which is possibly a distant relative of the Brinewing. While this is probably the best name for a creature in the Subnautica universe, there really is a creature like it here on Earth. The newtfish has the ability to expand its mouth into a massive circular veil to completely surround its prey, and probably to intimidate competition. Funnily enough, the newtfish's counterpart also has a great name, the sarcastic fringehead. These fish also have the ability to massively expand their mouth to intimidate prey, competitors, and potential predators. It's also likely that the newtfish took inspiration from the TV show character Pingu, which was able to move its mouth in a similar way, making a signature sound to communicate. The next creature on the list is the Crypt Asuka, one of the most recent additions to the game, but also one of the coolest designs for any creature on 4546B to me. Just from the name itself, it's clear that the Crypt Asuka is at least in part inspired by or plays the role of the crocodile here on Earth, as the name itself means hidden croc. The original concept art for the Crypt Asuka also mentioned that they swim like otters, which when you have a look at them side by side, it's actually pretty clear to see. Next, we have the sea monkey. No doubt one of the most intelligent creatures in the oceans of 4546B, these guys seem like they have inspirations from a whole bunch of real-life species. Its fingers, if that's the right word, share a striking resemblance to those of several tree frog species, with the toe pads, which the frogs use for grips, used by the sea monkey to hold objects. The head of the sea monkey is very similar to that of the beluga whale with an almost identical mouth shape. Interestingly, the baby sea monkey is also very similar in appearance to the embryo of a dolphin, though this might just be a coincidence. Next up, we have the brute shark. These aggressive predators populate some of the biomes which you are most likely to enter early in the game, and while these may be slow and seem to lack any real intelligence, their bite can deal a serious amount of damage. For the general body shape and behaviour of the brute shark, it's clear that the inspiration was, unsurprisingly, taken from sharks here on Earth. The design of the shark's wings also seems to take inspiration from rays in our oceans. The structure of the brute shark's head also shares similarities with reconstructions of the extinct Gorgonopsians, an ancient carnivore from over 150 million years ago. The pinnacarid is one of the most elegant creatures in the oceans of 4546B. Capable of movement on both land and in the water, it's clear that they play the role of a seal here on Earth, while also sharing similarities with them in their body shape. It's also possible that the fins, which appear down each side of the pinnacarid, are inspired by Anomalocarids, a family of arthropods from the Cambrian era which lived on Earth around 500 million years ago. Sticking with creatures which spend their life both on land and underwater, next up we have the penguin. Now for a while it took me a bit of research, but I think I've discovered that the penguin is most likely inspired by penguins. Despite alien features like the rows of razor-sharp teeth in the beak and 4 eyes, penguins are essentially the same shape and size as your typical king penguin here on Earth. Penguins are of course also greatly inspired by our flightless friends from Antarctica. Trivalves also share the ability to survive both on land and underwater, and as alien as they might look, they actually share similarities with quite a few species here in real life. The general body shape appears to have been inspired by the shell of a nautilus. Trivalves also display the unique ability to swim upside down, and this can be seen here on Earth in the horseshoe crab. Horseshoe crabs rarely ever actually swim, but when they do it upside down. Even down to the name, it appears that the trivalve was inspired by the bivalvia class of mollusks, which have a shell made up of 2 hinged parts. The fact that it has 3 eyes likely led to the use of tri in the name. Another armoured inhabitant of 4546b's oceans is the rock puncher. It's clear that the rock puncher is basically a scaled up mantis shrimp, and their behaviour also shares some similarities with its earthly counterpart. Mantis shrimps have similar club-like forearms which are capable of delivering very powerful blows to their prey, able to smash victims' shells with a force 100 times that of its weight. Let's just be thankful that mantis shrimps aren't the size of rock punchers here on Earth, because if they were, you definitely wouldn't find me in the sea ever again. Next up we have the Titan holefish. These guys are some of the most friendly looking creatures on 4546b, seemingly inspired by Earth's own ocean sunfish based on its shape and general behaviour. Unfortunately for us, Titan holefish have a symbiotic relationship with the aptly named symbiotes, a small aggressive species which protects the Titan holefish from any unwanted visitors. This kind of symbiotic relationship isn't an alien concept at all, as plenty of species share this behaviour here on Earth. The symbiote's behaviour seems to resemble the cleaning relationship that several real-world creatures such as cleaner wrasse have with other various creatures ranging from fish to turtles. Snow stalkers might look cuddly, but believe me, you don't want to give them a hug. Well, maybe you do, but don't. Much like their obvious real-world counterparts polar bears, snow stalkers might seem cute, but it's best to admire them from a distance. Their size and general behaviour firmly positions them as 4546b equivalent to Earth's polar bears. Their long snout also resembles that of a typical crocodile. Another interesting feature of the snow stalker is their long claws, which are potentially inspired by those of an anteater, except snow stalkers would use them for digging into ice and snow for food rather than anthills. Next we have the spinnerfish. While this creature was originally created as part of concept art for the first Subnautica game, it eventually managed to roll its way into Subnautica Below Zero. Even though it's probably a coincidence, the spinnerfish does actually share some similarities with the larval form of the ocean sunfish, with its spiky star-shaped appearance. It's also likely that the general design was at least partially inspired by sea stars, with several arms protruding from its central body. On Earth, it's not that often you find creatures that move in the way the spinnerfish does, rotating its entire body to move through the water, but this method of movement is used by the wheel spider, which rolls into a ball to traverse long distances quickly. Next up we have another creature which really puzzled me. I'm not sure if we'll ever be able to figure out exactly what the developers took inspiration from. This is the jellyfish. On a more serious note, next up we have the discus fish. While these might seem like simple creatures at first glance, there's actually a lot more to them than meets the eye. The concept art for the discus fish reveals that the green coloration on its skin is caused by symbiotic algae-like organisms living within specialised body cavities. This symbiotic relationship is likely inspired by the golden jellyfish of Jellyfish Lake, which is also covered in a form of symbiotic algae. The appendages on the rear end of the discus fish's body also look to be inspired by real-life arthropods such as earwigs, which use it for self-defense. One of the most interesting creatures in Below Zero has to be the Lilypadleur. Similar to the Mesmer in Subnautica but less aggressive, the Lilypadleur has the ability to hypnotise potential predators so that they become disorientated and harmless. Certain creatures here on Earth do in fact have abilities like these, such as the cuttlefish, which is able to use its millions of pigment cells to create ever-changing colours and patterns to mesmerise potential predators or prey. In terms of appearance, the Lilypadleur shares many similarities with the common sea dragon. No, not that one. That one. The claws on the end of their long arms also appear to be inspired by decapod crustaceans like crabs and lobsters. Another incredible looking inhabitant of 4546b's icy oceans is the Arctic ray. Unsurprisingly, these guys appear to be inspired by various species of rays here on Earth, but with 4 wings instead of the typical 2 you would expect to find. Also, the eye stalks seem to resemble those you would find on a snail or slug in your garden. Our final non-Leviathan creature is the Squid Shark. The PDA describes it as a small Leviathan, but also doesn't group it into the Leviathan category, so it's a little bit confusing as to what the Squid Shark actually is. Either way, the Squid Shark essentially fills the role of some of the larger sharks you'd find here on Earth, such as the Great White. For its unique protruding jaw, it's possible that the Squid Shark was inspired by the Goblin Shark, which has a similar ability to extend its jaws to completely encircle any prey unfortunate enough to get within its reach. It's also likely that the tubes behind its eyes, which look like an air intake on a car, are inspired by octopus siphons, which they use to expel water to swim and manoeuvre quickly. Moving on to the officially Leviathan class species, first up we have the Chillasura. The Chillasura has to be one of the oddest looking creatures in the game, appearing to be a huge mismatch of loads of different species. The name itself gives a hint to at least some inspiration, as here on Earth we have a classification called Chillasurata, which includes creatures like the previously mentioned horseshoe crab, sea spiders and scorpions. One extinct member of this family, the Eurypterid, shares a striking resemblance to the Chillasura, as they both share a body made up of 14 segments. Incredibly, despite the insanely alien appearance of the Chillasura's jaws, we do actually have jaws like these here on our planet, such as the camel spider, which boasts 4 incredibly sharp jaws, very similar to those of the Chillasura. Next up we have the ice worm. I'd argue these guys are the most terrifying creature in all of Subnautica, and if you've ever watched any of my live streams, you'll know they scare the absolute hell out of me. Whoa! Oh! Jesus. Unfortunately for us, creatures like the ice worm really do exist here on Earth, but luckily they're not usually a threat to humans. The overall design and behaviour of the ice worm appears to be inspired by the real-life bobbit worm, which lives in the ocean floor and leaps from the sand to snatch prey which swim past without any knowledge of their immediate incoming death. The tail spines on the rear of the ice worm were also likely inspired by those which can be found on various creatures such as earwigs. They also bear a striking resemblance to both the larvae and the adult trilobite beetles, with its orange and black appearance and a body lined with small appendages. I'm sorry to tell you this, but even the jaws of the ice worm aren't that alien. A close-up image of a deep-sea tube worm was very likely the inspiration for the design of the ice worm's terrifying mouth, but luckily for us, deep-sea tube worms aren't a danger to humans. I'd argue that the vent garden is the coolest species in the game. While we don't have any knowledge of colonial organisms of this size on Earth, the way the vent garden looks and functions is very similar to the Portuguese man-o'-war and other such siphonophores. These are colonial lifeforms made up of many specialised smaller animals which work together as a colony to create a superorganism such as the vent garden. In terms of its appearance, it's also possible that the vent garden was inspired by a type of underwater greenhouse called Nemo's Garden, though this obviously isn't a creature. Next up we have the glow whale, one of the most graceful leviathans on 4546b, up there with the reefbacks from the original game. Glow whales are unsurprisingly inspired by Earth's whale family due to its similar appearance, proportions and feeding behaviour. The ridges and spots that can be found on the glow whale's back also seem to share similarities with whale sharks. The frozen leviathan is one of the coolest things about Below Zero, so it'd be a massive shame to leave it off this list, even if we don't know a huge amount about it. Judging from its main features, it likely would have moved like a crocodile through the water, keeping its legs to the side of its body, with the massive tail providing huge amounts of propulsion. Despite its gargantuan size, the frozen leviathan has long, relatively thin teeth, which resemble those of piscivores, fish eaters, for eating prey much smaller than itself, as the teeth wouldn't have been suitable for the flesh of larger prey. Interestingly, it's been said that the frozen leviathan also has an appearance similar to that of the ancient amphibian Eriops, which existed around 300 million years ago, but obviously much larger and with a longer tail. They share a similar head and tooth shape and potentially displayed a similar amphibious lifestyle. The final creature on this list is the Shadow Leviathan. The apex predator of the Arctic zone's waters, the Shadow Leviathan is truly a sight to behold. Capable of almost killing a human player in just one bite, we can be thankful that something of this scale and aggression doesn't exist in our oceans. As far as we know, anyway. The tail portion of the Shadow Leviathan seems to take inspiration from the black ghost knifefish, which might be the coolest sounding fish name I've ever heard, as it's very similar in shape. The row of holes which can be seen running across both sides of the Shadow Leviathan, running from its tail to its head, is potentially inspired by the gill openings which can be found on lampreys. Finally, it appears that the mouth and mandible design of the Shadow Leviathan is based on the heads of arrow worms, which is a type of predatory marine worm ranging in size from 0.1 to 4.7 inches. The fact that these guys can even grow to be nearly 5 inches long is a terrifying thought to me, so just imagine how bad it would be if they were genuinely the same size as the Shadow, which measures in at over 2,300 inches or 60 meters in length. So there you have it guys, that's all the creatures in Below Zero which I could find to have real life counterparts or inspirations here on Earth. If you can think of any more, or if you disagree with anything I said in this video, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to read what you guys think. These are my favourite kind of videos to make, and I promised I'd make another one if the Subnautica one did well, and it did very well, so here I am. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe if you're feeling super generous, and maybe even support the channel by pressing the join button to get cool perks and my eternal love. Until the next video, I'll see you guys in the next one. Ta-ra, my friends.